Let me ask you something before we begin. Have you ever had a moment in your life that seemed innocent at first, but unraveled into something you never expected? A moment that made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself? Before I tell you what happened, drop a comment and let me know which city you're watching from. I love knowing where everyone's tuning in from. Now let me take you back to that evening, the one that changed everything. My name is Emily. I'm 68 years old and I live alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Missouri. It's one of those sleepy communities where everyone knows your name, waves politely, and minds their own business most of the time. I've been a widow for 9 years now. My husband, God rest his soul, was a good man, but since he passed, the days have grown longer and the nights lonelier. That evening started like any other. I had just finished pulling weeds from my garden, hands aching, back stiff. The summer sun was setting, casting a soft golden glow over the backyard. I was sweaty, tired, and frankly looking forward to a long hot shower to ease my joints. I slipped off my gardening gloves, left them on the kitchen counter, and made my way to the bathroom. I undressed slowly, enjoying the relief of letting the day go. The water steamed up the small space and I stepped in, closing the frosted glass door behind me. As the water rushed over my skin, I let my thoughts wander mostly to mundane things. What groceries I needed, if I had enough coffee, whether I'd bother trimming the hedge this weekend. And then I heard it. A creak. Not loud but not imagined either. I froze, water cascading down my shoulders. I strained my ears. Another soft creak. The sound of a door opening or closing. My heart began to beat faster. I was alone in the house. At least I should have been. I cracked open the shower door and peered through the foggy glass. Nothing. Silence. Hello, I called out, my voice trembling just a bit. Is someone there? And then I saw his shape, a shadow on the other side of the frosted glass. I gasped, pulling the door shut again. My breath caught in my chest. Emily, wait. It's me, Ethan. Ethan, my neighbor from 2 doors down. He's 43. Quiet, respectful. Often helped me with my yard or carried heavy things when he saw me struggling. Kind eyes, gentle hands. He was the kind of man who would check on me after storms, shovel my walk in the winter without asking, and always smiled with a softness that made me feel seen again. But now he was in my house while I was naked in the shower. What are you doing here? I asked, wrapping my arms around myself, even though he couldn't see me clearly. I knocked a few times. Your back door was unlocked. I heard water but you didn't answer. I was worried, he said, his voice hesitant. You always lock up. And I saw your garden gloves still outside. I thought something happened. I stood there in stunned silence. My initial fear faded into a strange blend of embarrassment, and something else I didn't want to name yet. I'm okay, I said, voice soft. You scared me, that's all. There was a pause. Neither of us spoke for a moment, the sound of water dripping filling the space between us. I'm sorry, Ethan said finally. I shouldn't have come in. When I didn't hear anything, I panicked. I guess I care about you more than I realized. That sentence. It hit differently, not just because of what he said, but how he said it, with a tenderness, a vulnerability that felt too raw to ignore. I appreciate it, I replied, suddenly aware of the heat in my cheeks that wasn't just from the hot water. I reached for the towel on the hook, turned off the water and wrapped myself tightly. Slowly I stepped out. He stood just outside the bathroom door, his back turned respectfully, staring down at the tiled hallway. I'm really sorry, Emily, he said again. I can leave. But I didn't want him to. I'm already out, I said, brushing the damp towel against my arms. You might as well stay a moment. I wouldn't mind the company. He turned around, eyes immediately lifting to meet mine, never once straying. Not to my wet hair, not to the towel clinging to my skin, just my eyes. That kind of restraint, that kind of respect, it disarmed me. I brought you those cucumbers from my garden, he said, holding up a small paper bag like a nervous schoolboy. You mentioned you liked them fresh. That made me laugh just a little. The tension broke. I stepped aside and invited him into the living room while I excused myself to get dressed. I wrapped myself in a house coat, combed through my damp hair, and stared at myself in the mirror. Why was my heart still pounding? I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. Not since before Daniel died. When I joined Ethan in the living room, He was sitting on the edge of the couch, bag of cucumbers between his hands, as if unsure whether to stay or flee. "Thank you," I said, sitting across from him. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, just surprised and grateful. Most people wouldn't care that much. "I do," he said, holding my gaze. "I care more than I should probably." And that's when the air between us shifted, not in a reckless or inappropriate way. It was deeper, unspoken, charged with something that neither of us had planned for. Something had begun that night. A quiet unraveling of old loneliness. A quiet realization that connection doesn't always come how or when you expect it. But once it shows up, it's impossible to ignore. That night, after Ethan left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, its rhythmic sound a poor substitute for peace. My thoughts kept circling back to the moment I stepped out of that shower, to the look in Ethan's eyes, not startled, not ashamed, just honest, like he'd seen a part of me I hadn't shown anyone in years. And it wasn't just the physical exposure. It was the fact that I let him see me afraid, vulnerable, and he didn't flinch. The next morning, I moved slowly through the house, still caught in a strange fog. I watered the potted plants in the kitchen window, cracked the screen door to let in the fresh summer air, and waited for what I wasn't sure. I didn't have to wait long. Around 10 a.m. there was a knock at the door. I hesitated, wiping my hands on a towel, suddenly aware that my robe was hanging loosely over my pajama top. When I opened the door, there he was, Ethan, standing on my porch, hair slightly damp like he'd just come from a shower himself, clean-shaven, wearing a plain white t-shirt that clung to his frame and faded jeans that looked worn in the way that told you he worked with his hands. "Morning," he said, offering a small smile. I wanted to apologize again. But more than that, I wanted to see if you were okay. I stepped aside without a word, and let him in. He moved carefully like he didn't want to take up too much space. I poured us both some coffee, hand steady, but the rest of me wasn't. He sat across from me at the table, both of us cupping warm mugs like we needed the anchor. "I was out of line," he said softly. "I've been beating myself up about it all night. I know how it must have felt me showing up like that." "You were worried," I replied. "That matters more than the timing." He looked down for a moment, then back at me. "There's something else, though." My breath hitched just slightly. I nodded, encouraging him to go on. "I didn't just come in because I was worried. I think a part of me just wanted to see you, even if it wasn't the right moment, even if it was awkward." He laughed nervously. "I'm not good at this kind of thing. But I've been feeling something for a while now, and I haven't known what to do with it." I sat back in my chair, heart thudding in my chest. "It's okay," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "Because I felt it too." His eyes lifted to mine, gentle, uncertain, but open. The air between us grew warm again, heavy with something that hadn't yet turned into words. "I don't even know what to call it," he said. "You're older than me and people would probably talk, but when I'm around you I feel calm, safe. You make me feel like I matter." That broke something in me because I hadn't felt that in so long either. Like I was more than just someone's memory, someone's neighbor. Like I still had something to give, something worth offering. "You do matter," I said. "And maybe this doesn't make sense to anyone else, but it doesn't have to." He reached across the table, then slowly, carefully, and touched my hand. His skin was warm, his touch steady, and I didn't pull away. We sat like that for a while. No rush, no urgency, just two people who had stumbled into something unexpected. A connection born not of impulse, but of something gentler, a soft unraveling. Eventually he stood. "I should let you go about your day," he said. "But if you're open to it, maybe we could take a walk later. Just talk." I nodded. "I'd like that." He smiled, and this time it reached all the way to his eyes. When he left, I stayed seated at the table, my coffee now cold in front of me. I was smiling without realizing it. My chest felt warm. Not the aching, lonely warmth of longing, but the kind that comes from being seen, truly seen. It wasn't about romance. Not yet. It was about finding a piece of yourself reflected in someone else. About knowing you weren't invisible after all. And somehow that was more powerful than anything else. Later that evening, just as the golden light of sunset slipped across the rooftops, I changed into a soft blue blouse and a pair of linen pants. Nothing fancy, but something that made me feel like myself, presentable, comfortable, maybe even hopeful. Ethan knocked lightly at the door like he didn't want to disturb more than necessary. When I opened it, he gave me that same quiet smile he always did. Only this time it felt different. It felt shared. Understood. Ready? He asked. I nodded and stepped out onto the porch with him. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the slow hum of cicadas. We walked down the street in silence at first, just listening to the world around us, the crunch of gravel underfoot, a dog barking in the distance, the soft clink of wind chimes from someone's porch. We ended up near the little park at the edge of the neighborhood. There was no one there, just a wooden bench under an old oak tree and the soft chirping of birds settling in for the night. We sat. I haven't done this in years, I said, glancing at him. Just walked with someone for no reason, no destination. That's the best kind of walk, he replied. When you don't have to be anywhere, when you can just be. There was a pause, but not the uncomfortable kind, the kind that makes room for something else to arrive. I used to come here with Daniel, I said, surprising myself with the mention of my late husband. He liked to feed the birds. Would sneak crackers from the pantry and act like he was doing something rebellious. I smiled at the memory, soft and bittersweet. Ethan looked at me carefully. You must miss him a lot. I do, but not in the way people think. I paused. I don't ache for him anymore. Not all the time. Mostly I just remember the good parts and I carry them with me. But sometimes I wonder if that means I've let too much of myself go quiet. That maybe I stopped being a woman and started just being the widow. He turned toward me then, his voice low but clear. You haven't gone quiet, Emily. I hear you. Loud and clear. That stayed with me. Echoed in my chest like a tuning fork struck just right. We talked about simple things after that. About his work. He's a contractor, mostly remodeling kitchens and bathrooms. About his childhood, his mother who raised him alone, his old dog that died last year, and how he still hasn't been able to get another. I don't think people realize how lonely a man can get, he said softly, looking out at the empty park. I glanced at him, the fading sunlight highlighting the gentle lines on his face. I think a lot of people are lonelier than they admit, especially the kind ones. That made him smile. Tired but real. On the walk back it started to drizzle. Not heavy, just a gentle mist that made everything smell like earth and leaves. He took off his jacket and held it over us, though I could tell he was getting wet too. When we got back to my porch, we stood for a moment. The porch light buzzed faintly, casting a warm glow around us. Would you like to come in for a bit? I asked almost shyly. I made lemon cake earlier. It's nothing fancy. He nodded. I'd love to. We sat at the small table by the kitchen window. I poured us both some tea, and we ate in the soft quiet of the house. The sound of rain tapping the window, the smell of citrus and sugar between us. At one point I reached for his empty plate and our hands brushed. Neither of us moved away. Emily, he said, his voice just above a whisper. Can I tell you something without making things weird? Yes, I replied, even though my breath had caught again. I think about you not just lately, for a while now. You're not like anyone I've ever met. You have this way of making a man feel human again, like he's not broken. I didn't say anything for a moment. I looked down, then back up at him. You make me feel the same, I said. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. What passed between us was deeper than that. More sacred even. He stayed for another hour. We talked about books, about music, about the dumb things people say at funerals. We laughed more than I expected. When he finally left, he stood in the doorway and looked at me like he didn't want to go, but he did. And somehow that made me trust him even more. After the door closed, I stood alone in the kitchen. My hand still warm from holding his. Something was shifting, something real. It wasn't a rush. It wasn't a fire. It was a slow bloom, the kind that starts deep in the soil under everything and takes its time coming into the light. The following week unfolded like a quiet symphony, each day adding a new note, subtle but beautiful. Ethan and I didn't rush anything. We didn't need to. Our connection was growing like something planted with care, watered daily with presence and sincerity. He started coming by more often, sometimes in the mornings with a cup of coffee in hand, just to sit on the porch with me and watch the sun rise. Other times in the evenings when the light dipped low and the crickets began to sing. We talked, we laughed, we shared little pieces of ourselves that had long been tucked away. There was a calmness in those moments and a steady sense of being seen. One afternoon we decided to cook dinner together. I hadn't cooked with anyone in years. The kitchen felt smaller, warmer as we moved around each other, laughing as he nearly dropped the bowl of roasted potatoes, and I tried not to burn chicken. He wasn't the best cook, but he tried. And that effort, that meant more to me than the food itself. As we sat down to eat, something shifted again, something subtle but certain. "Emily," he said as we finished the meal, setting his fork down slowly, "do you ever think it's too late to start something new?" I looked at him, really looked. The gentle crease in his brow, the flicker of vulnerability in his voice. He wasn't asking a general question. He was asking us. "I used to," I said, setting my napkin down. "But now, not so much, because I think life keeps offering us these moments, these second chances, and it's up to us whether we're brave enough to say yes." He reached across the table, fingers wrapping softly around mine. It was such a simple gesture, but it held everything. The fear, the hope, the quiet joy of possibility. Later that night, after he'd helped me do the dishes and the house had grown still, I walked him to the door. We stood in the threshold again, just like before. But this time the moment didn't end with silence. "Would it be okay if I kissed you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart fluttered, not with nerves, but with something older, something more grounded. I nodded. And when his lips touched mine, it wasn't wild or rushed. It was tender, steady, filled with intention, like he wasn't trying to take anything from me, just to be with me. When we pulled apart, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Peace and maybe a bit of wonder. He didn't stay the night. We weren't ready for that. What we were building wasn't built on impulse. It was built on care. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the shadows of trees sway in the moonlight. I felt a quiet strength inside me, a rekindling of something I thought was long gone. Love at this age isn't loud. It doesn't rush. It doesn't try to be something it's not. It's gentle. It's patient. It shows up unexpectedly, like a knock at the door while you're in the shower, and it changes everything. Ethan and I never made promises we couldn't keep. We just kept showing up for each other day by day. And in that showing up, I found something I hadn't known. I was still looking for a companion, a witness, a new chapter. Not an ending, but a beginning I never saw.